Welcome to this week's Hymn of the Week. This week we have EOW 696, Jesus Calls Us Over the Tumult. Cecil Frances Alexander, there's a lot to share about her. She was born in Dublin, Ireland in 1818, and she has this great history of writing poetry as a young girl, and she would hide it under the carpet. And her dad was very stern, and most of the family expected that when he found those poems, that he would possibly reprimand her, who knows what. But instead, he bought her a very beautiful box that she could put these poems inside. And then he asked her to share them with the family on Saturday evenings. And lo and behold, a poet was born. And if we haven't recognized Cecil Frances Alexander, then I wouldn't say we're totally surprised, because her poetry is so good, sometimes we don't realize it's elsewhere. Once in Royal David City, for example, All Things Bright and Beautiful. It is over in some of the very popular hymns. It can be found. So fast forward, so that's the 1840s. We're going to fast forward now to 1850. Remember, she was born in 1818. She married William Alexander, an Anglican priest. And of course, that always brought an exciting life for her. So one day in November, and this was in I believe 1852, but it was 1850s, that she was talking with her husband about a sermon for St. Andrew's Day, as often, I guess, spouses would discuss some of the sermon material. And the reading for St. Andrew's Day in Matthew 4, verses 18 to 20, is about Jesus calling out to the disciples to follow me. And so she penned this text, Jesus calls us over the tumult, and it was read the following Sunday, immediately following the sermon. So you can imagine quite a powerful moment, because the sermon was preached, and instead of going to the next thing, whatever that would be, this poem was read. Jesus calls us over the tumult of our life's wild, restless sea. Day by day, his clear voice sounding, saying, Christian, follow me. And that's only verse 1. How about closing that reading with verse 5? Even though I believe there was originally 6 verses. Jesus calls us by your mercy. Savior, may we hear your call. Give our hearts to your obedience. Serve and love you best of all. So I'm sure that was very powerful on that November 30th. And another thing to take into consideration was from 1845 to 1849, Ireland's recovering from these potato famines. So in 1850s, this was still a text that it probably had the potato famines probably had some influence upon this text, and it being penned by Cecil Frances Alexander. We know that she made frequent visits to those struggling in the 1850s, and she would give away her earnings from her poetry. So she was trying to live a Christian lifestyle. So in many ways, if that's the way to phrase it, in many ways, that phrase that sometimes gets overlooked in verse 3, right at the end of the verse, Christian, love me more. Or, verse 4, love me more than these, is really saying what she was living. The fact that we have to give it all up for Christ. And it's a very powerful concept, and it's very hard for Christians to do. The tune by Jude Galilee was added in 1874. It wasn't the tune that would fit all of these texts. This text has been set to other tunes, of course. If you find them, put them in the links, or put them in the notes or comment section. That would be great. But more importantly, it's the idea, when I begin to play this, how freeing it is. It's hard today to give everything up for Jesus, absolutely. And I think Jesus knows that. I'm sure he knows that. But we can begin somewhere to start. And how freeing it is when we begin to give things up for Christ. We don't always know it. Sometimes it's like going to the gym. We feel, oh, gotta go, right? But then we get to the gym, and we feel great about it, that we made that decision to go. So hence, I have decided to adapt some ideas from Bert Carlson to give a more jazzy approach to this because it's often sung in a swung manner, this tune, to remind us of how freeing it can be when we release these concerns, these worries, these things that we have to let go for the sake of drawing closer to Jesus. So here is Jesus Calls Us O'er the Tumult. So a slightly different interpretation of this hymn, but I definitely feel it applies to how freeing it can be when we let go of those things for Christ. And isn't it great in verse 2 there that we have, as of old St. Andrew heard it by the Galilean lake, we see that connection to St. Andrew's Day. Thank you very much for listening to Hymn of the Week.